Hello and welcome to this tutorial on making Anduril in Blender. That is the sword that Tolkien's Aragorn carries in the Lord of the Rings series, and we will be modeling it as it appears in the Peter Jackson film. Let's start by getting some reference material on which to base our model. You should get as many images from different angles of the details as is helpful for you, but I like this collection of images on this site. A link to this site is in the description. Open up Blender and start a new general scene. You'll see that I have my screencast keys on, so you should see everything that I'm doing. Press 1 on the number pad to go to front view, and we'll want to add our reference images right here in the viewport. So press Shift A for the add menu that can also be found at the top of the viewport. We'll go down to image and reference. Go to the place where you've saved those images. Select your full front view. That is the entire length of the sword. I have removed the background just to make it more readable on the video. You can do that too if that makes it easier for you. We'll want to go back to our website where we got our images and see that to the right of these pictures there is a list of dimensions. The one that's important to us is the length. Back in Blender, we're going to add a cube from the Shift A menu, of course. Take that total length of 1350 or 1350 and go to item on the number menu here. If you don't see that, hit N, that will hide or show it. We can select all of the dimensions, X, Y, and Z, and type in 1350. Now that might be super small. If you're having difficulty seeing the cube that you've just resized, you'll want to go over here on the right-hand panel and go down to Scene and Units, and make sure that metric is your unit system and that your length is set to millimeters. Now with that cube selected, if you can't see it to select it, it is in your outliner. And go back to dimensions again and type 1350. Now that is the total length of your sword. We want our reference image to match this, so select your reference image. Select the Data tab on the Properties menu. We want the image to show in front of everything else. We want the opacity turned on and turned down to something like 0.2. 0.3, somewhere in there, so that it's in front of your model, but that you can see through it. Now we'll simply use the S key to enable scaling and scale that down to have the tip of the sword and the pommel of the sword match up fairly closely to that cube. And it looks like we have it right here. Now we can delete the cube. And we are left with our reference image to the correct scale to start modeling our sword. We're going to start by modeling the pommel. So let's add a plane, tab into edit mode, and you can see we have a plane, but we want to merge all of that at the center. So M brings up merge, A or click center will take it all down to a single vertex. So let's take that up to the pommel and put that on the corner right there. Let's add a mirror modifier. And you'll see that we have one vertex, but the mesh is on both sides of the x-axis. Turn on clipping so that nothing crosses the line of symmetry. And we can control right click, and this will extrude vertices. Get enough that there is a nice curve without putting on subdivision surface. If you're not familiar with what that is, we will get to it. But right now, we're just going to give ourselves some geometry to work with. Now, we can get all these evenly spaced manually and on a nice curve, but there is a an add-on that helps us do that more easily, and that is called Loop Tools. So if we go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, Get Extensions, and up here type Loop Tools, and you'll see I already have it enabled, but you'll just need to click Install if it's not already enabled on your system. And what that does is it gives us some other options in our right-click menu. In this case, I want to space. So it will try to evenly space things along the curve or the connecting lines that they're on. And that looks pretty good. It's not super important to have it exactly evenly spaced, but it does make things nicer to look at and generally easier to deal with. So let's extrude this over to the center. And I'm kind of doing this in real time. So you'll probably see mistakes and things that I make, and I'll walk them back, that sort of thing. So let's take all of this, fill it in with a single face, and use I to inset. Before you click, you can hit B for border. However, that's not doing what we want. So what I'm going to do real quickly is select all of this, extrude, just giving me some geometry around the outside. Now let's select that face, inset, and select B for border selection or border exclusion really, and bring that into about that central ridge. I'm looking at the top up here. It's coming along this ridge. And I'm going to delete the face for now. X is delete, or the delete key will also bring up the same thing. And holding Alt and clicking on an edge will get all the faces that are connected in that line. And we'll delete those as well. So now we have this. We'll continue moving vertices around. Double tapping G slides vertices along their connected edges. And G simply moves them. Let's see. We'll bring this up a little bit and bring that to the center. And let's make sure that vertices that touch when we move them weld together. So that is this option up here next to options. And now when vertices share the same space, they merge. And there is that merge there. So now we have all quads geometry for this segment while getting the shape we want. Now, I'm not sure I like the way this edge is moving or pointing. We'll kind of deal with it for now. Let's use our loop tools again on here, and we will space them. And let's see, I wonder if relax will help us a little bit. So that looks good. Now, from the reference images that are more on an angle, you'll see that this center area is inset, or it goes lower than the rest of the hilt, or pommel as it might be. So let's take this segment and fill that in, inset again. We're going to inset without having our mirror modifier on at the moment. And so this made a mess of things, or so it seems. Let's take all of these. And if we shift click, one of them will be our last selected vertex. Hit M for merge again, and we'll merge at last. That is the last selected vertex. So they all come together here. All right, so I'm kind of figuring out this geometry as we go. Deleting that edge. And that edge. And we'll turn our mirror back on and bring these back on the X. Now, this is too little geometry for my taste. So what I'm going to do is we merged too many of these, or I merged too many of these. We're going to hit K for knife, click on there and click over here and hit enter. Remove this edge with Control X. That'll dissolve without getting rid of the connecting geometry. That might be enough. In fact, let's bring back one more of these with the knife tool and dissolve that edge. And we do want to maintain this edge here because that is going to be a crease in our geometry. We'll do a merge last again there. Seems okay. Now get rid of that as well. Now let's just kind of move these around, see if we're on point. Yeah, that looks all right. Yeah, these seem okay. So let's relax these and space them out. Looks good. Bring this up here. There we go. That looks like the shape. Now, obviously, this is all just flat at the moment. We're going to change that in just a minute here. But this ridge moving up and down here is kind of an area that sticks out more than what's behind it. So we're going to move these in to kind of follow it. Might be kind of hard to see in this reference image. You can always find a clearer one, I guess. All right, that looks pretty good. And we'll select this where this edge kind of meets this one. And you know what? Yeah, that's what we're going to do. Bring this out. And we want these to match up with vertices on the ridge that already exists. So we'll try and do the same number of them. If I select all of these and hit scale, S for scale, and then Z for scale on the Z, we want these to all line up on the same line, basically. So now that I've scaled on Z, I can just hit 0, enter, and they're lined up. So let's select this edge, control click this edge, shift click here, and control click again down here. Now we've got these two lines of edges selected. Control E will bring up our edge tools. L is bridge. So that will bridge them for you and fill in this triangle as well. Now this isn't a really good curve. So let's just move these around until we have something that looks good. Actually, there wasn't a whole lot to move. Look good for now. It can always be changed later. But getting things right at the beginning when you're roughing in a mesh is always the best place to fix things and get them right, because later it just gets more difficult. All right, so let's take this central ridge here, 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 and move it out on the Y axis. So G, Y, bring that out like that. And all of it, if we hit A, select all, needs to be moved on the Y a little bit. Select all of this, that's Alt-click, and extrude that a little on the Y back the way it came. And over on the mirror modifier, turn on Y, because we want this to mirror that direction as well. And since we have clipping on, we can just drag this all the way to the 0 plane on Y. Now this looks pretty good. We'll know once we get our handle in place, or our grip portion of the handle, if this is the right proportions. But right now, Alt-click that lower edge and bring it down, or rather extrude it down on the Z to here. And Control R is what adds edge loops. So Control R, scroll up on the scroll wheel to get more edges, and click twice to place them. We're going to move these. If you'll notice, if I move that, there's still a vertex behind it that it didn't select. Alt-Z, or this button right up here, will turn on X-ray mode. So if we select, it will select straight through. Let's move those on the Y, or rather on the X axis. And I'm not just going to keep talking to fill blank space on the audio. I'll talk when there's something to say. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now, I think what's going to end up happening here is that this edge is sticking out way too far. But this may not be out far enough. So I have an idea in mind of how we're going to fix that. But right now, let's name this piece Pommel. So F2 brings up the rename, or you could double click it in the outliner as well. Pommel. It's not complete yet, but that is a good place to stop with that and move on to the grip. Our 3D cursor is all the way down here. You can reposition it with Shift right click if you like, but the 3D cursor is where any new object is going to show up. I want to add a circle. So that's Shift A, Mesh, Circle, and it creates a circle. Pressing F9 will bring up this little menu that's usually in the bottom right or bottom left. We want this to have only 6 sides, and it needs to be a whole lot smaller, but we're not going to worry about that. We'll just scale the object. Which brings up another important function that we need to pay attention to, which is applying the scale to objects once we have them where we want them. So we're going to scale this here to right there. Now you'll see that the scale over here is 0.22. We want the scale to be 1. Otherwise, some of our mesh functions just won't be working correctly. Let's bring up the Apply menu, which is Control A, and apply our rotation and our scale. With our scale and rotation applied, you can see that we didn't scale anything on the pommel, so we didn't need to. But now that we've applied that, let's go back to our grip piece here. Might as well name it while we're at it. Grip. And we're going to tab into edit mode, select everything. It's already selected. And extrude on the Z-axis. Right about there. Now, let's take a look at this in perspective mode. A handle is never round like that, mainly so that you can feel which way the sword is facing. Let's scale all of it on the Y to about there. And these central ridges will bring out scale on the Y. That looks pretty good. I don't have any dimensions for what the handle's supposed to be, so we're going to go with that. The top is more narrow than the base, so we'll scale this on the X, but not on the Y. So make sure it scales only on the X. So now we have this kind of tapered look. If I Alt-Z, it'll bring us back to not X-ray mode, just normal. And looking here at the front, there are some little finger grips that go around. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 of them in a reference image that I have off screen. So let's Control R and scroll up till we have 6 edges, or edge loops rather. With them still selected, hit Control B for bevel and move your mouse. And these are going to be our ridges that we're extruding, so make them about like that. And Alt-E with these still selected brings up our extrude menu. We want to extrude faces along normals. That way they all kind of come out on their normals. And they're not huge. So let's just put them there. And before clicking out of that, either down here or on the F9 menu, click Offset Even. It looks like in this case it didn't matter, but sometimes you get some weird skewed results when it's not even. So at this point, this is all the modeling that really needs to be done on this grip. However, it doesn't really look like the picture. So this is where we're going to start our sub-D modeling. Let's go into edge selection mode with 2, or by clicking up here. And we will Alt, and then Shift-Alt, click the remaining edges that go vertically. And we're going to set those as bevels. So a bevel weight of 1. Now that didn't bevel anything. This is for a bevel modifier to tell it what to do. So let's do that now. We'll add under generate a bevel modifier. And this limit method needs to be set to weight because we set a bevel weight. And it's got some very beveled edges now, but let's turn this bevel amount way down to say 2 millimeters. Looks okay for now. Let's change this to 2 segments. If you tab out, you'll see what's happening. And I think those need to be a little tighter still. So let's take it down to 1 millimeter. That looks all right. Secondarily, we want to bevel these to round them out, but we're going to select them and just do a regular destructive bevel on them. So with all of those selected, Control B will bring up bevel, and you'll see they go kind of like past each other. If you hit C, that will constrain the edges to stop when they hit another edge. Let's roll up on the scroll wheel 1 time. And that looks all right. Now we may have some geometry that's not quite meeting, and it looks that way. We may want that, we may not. So now we want to add our subdivision surface modifier on top of this. So the quick way to do that is Control 2. Control 1 will do it as well. Control 1 would add a view level amount to 1 rather than 2. Control 2 makes it 2. That's all the difference is. So now this is subdividing nicely, except we have these ridges down the centers of each of these. And we don't want that. So if we tab into edit mode, the reason why is that when these edges met each other, they either didn't come close enough to merge or they simply didn't merge. So what we will do is just select all, merge, and we'll merge by distance. And that will merge any vertices together that are closer than this 0.1 millimeter. So now that looks pretty good, but now we still have this faceted look. Right click and hit shade smooth. And that's looking pretty good. If we hit the slash on the numpad, we'll put this in localized view. And it looks like maybe our bevels were a little too tight. So let's go over here and change it to 2, 1.5. I like 1.5. That looks good. So that is the magic of modifiers. You can turn them on, turn them off as you go, change them without destroying your mesh. So that is the grip. We're going to go back to the pommel and finish that out now that we know what our proportions should be when it matches up here. In order to help us with that a little, I'm going to add another window here, or open another editor as it's called, and we're going to change that to an image editor. And in that image editor, I'm going to open the file that I've been referencing and not showing you. So let's have that here. And this is the area that this is going to help us with. We want to know how close this ridge should come to the handle before we make this kind of loop around the top. So we can see it's pretty close already. But what we're going to do is, you know what's annoying me right now is that this reference image is kind of annoying me because I don't really need it right now, but it's on top of everything the way we set it, but it's still annoying. So I'm going to come up here to the outliner, rename this working. The name of it doesn't really matter, but it just kind of helps us organize. And we're going to right click and add a new collection and call this ref or reference, however that helps you. We're going to put that in ref. This empty is our reference image. And I'm going to turn off that collection. So right now we just have our geometry. And right now, if we were to render, anything that's in a collection that's turned off would not be in our render either. So it's a handy way to have things in your scene that are not in your render. Now, let's take this inner section here and extrude that to the center. It's interesting. We have things that I have merge turned on over here, but it doesn't appear to be merging or something. So anyway, we're going to control click to here, and that will select just what I want. We'll extrude it on the Y until it stops. And we'll take this raised section, and we're going to look at this from the side angle. So 3 or Shift C on your number pad will bring you there. In fact, let's do, or Control 3. So Control 3 will show us the side that we're actually working on. And we're going to use the, I believe it's called the skew tool. I know it exists over here somewhere. However, the shortcut is one of the longest ever. Control, Shift, Alt, S and X to skew on the X axis. So you can see what it does here. Rather than rotate, which would, I'll show you what rotating would do. That kind of skews things all over the place, where this does a better job of keeping things in order. So we'll skew it that much. It's called shear, not skew. So if we're looking at the whole thing, that looks all right. The point of a pommel is to add weight, a counterbalance to the blade. So it makes sense that it's kind of fatter there than at the base. And this is where our loop tools add-on is going to come in handy. However, to do that, there's a circle command that makes what we have selected into a circle. That won't work in this case because we have everything mirroring. So we'll want to apply our mirror modifier, but before we do that, select everything that you would want a bevel on, and we're going to do the same thing that we just did to the grip, which is mark some edges for bevel and do our subdivision surface. So that looks good. We might not want that one. So we'll take these, and if you don't get them all, it's not the end of the world. You can just add them to your selection later and give them another bevel weight of 1. All right, so now that we have these marked for bevel, they'll carry across when we apply our mirror modifier. So that's what we'll do now. Over here on this drop down, select apply. Now in edit mode, you can see that the entire mesh is there. It's not simply a modifier. And let's make sure everything is is merged where it should be. Looks like it is. All right. Now let's take this edge loop as an alt click. I realized I haven't been saying everything that I'm clicking. However, we have our handy dandy screencast add-on down here showing you everything I'm doing. Hopefully that's helpful to you. We're going to extrude this on the Z a little bit and see we have our auto merge on, and it was not far enough away from the original geometry to not merge. So we're going to turn that off because we're not moving this very far. E, Z, merges on the Z, and right click, loop tools, circle. And it made a circle of everything that we had selected. Let's scale it out and rotate on the Z until our geometry is facing the right direction. In fact, what I'm going to do is go to local on here, and Control-7 will view at the view from the bottom. And this won't be exact, but I'm just going to rotate it so that our key points are all facing pretty much in the cardinal directions, like that. All right. Coming out of local view, I'm going to scale this on the Y. Right there. So we have this sort of oval, and we can see in our image over here that it doesn't come out real far, but it is an oval. So if we go back to front view and we turn on our reference image, we will extrude this loop again on the Z, actually down to this little groove that goes around it. And then we'll extrude again. And in X-ray mode, so Alt-Z, grab these center pieces and come down to here because there is a bit of a point here. oval may need more geometry, but right now I think it'll work. So we're going to take this entire loop here minus the 2 on the ends of each side. Control E and loop. It's going to be L. So that we get a connection across there, then fill these in with F. There we go. And this bottom edge should probably be marked as a bevel weight of 1, especially across the bottom here, because we want a point when we put our subdivision on there. And this we want to Control B to bevel like that, and make sure there is a central ridge down the center of it. So make sure it doesn't look like that it's like that. And we'll select that central one. And we're going to Alt S to scale this along its normals. And we'll bring it in about like that. In fact, scale these on the Z. And let's add our subdivision. In local view, I'm selecting all the wrong stuff. Select this, Pommel, go to local view, and we can see just what it looks like right now. Doesn't look great. So we don't have a bevel modifier on it. So let's add that under generate and make sure it is before the subdivision. That looks better. Let's change this limit method to weight. And we're going to change these segments to 2. You can have that at whatever you want, but 2 gets a pretty good tight crease without adding a huge amount of geometry every time it subdivides. So let's bring this down to 1 millimeter. And these do have to be fairly tight. So there's just a little bit left on the hilt, or rather the pommel, to change up here. We need to, first we're going to disable subdivision for the moment so that we can see our geometry, bevel as well. So we're going to do that. There is an add-on that gives you these buttons that kind of toggles everything all at once. I decided not to really cover that for this tutorial because adding too many things that aren't part of Blender by default is kind of annoying for a lot of people. So we're going to take this edge and we're going to move it on the Y a little bit out this way. And this, I think, will move a little the other direction. That looks good. And so that our editing doesn't get too repetitive, let's go back to removing half of our mesh in 2 directions here. So we'll delete all of that, and we're gonna put our mirror modifier back on here. However, we had taken it off or applied it so that we could do our circle command there. It's not super convenient, but it's what we have. So if we go into X-ray mode, that actually makes this easier. Okay, now we have that. And we're actually looking at a side we didn't want to look at. So here's a perfect opportunity to show something else. Take all of this, spacebar for search, or F3, depending how you set up Blender. We're going to symmetrize, and we're going to go -Y to +Y, or positive to negative. There we go. Positive to negative. And now I'll get rid of these again. Didn't have X-ray on. That's why I have to keep doing these selections over and over. All right. Now it's set up the way we had it. Let's add a mirror. That's under generate mirror, and we want it X and Y, and we'll put it before bevel, before everything else, so that they can all apply after it. So let's take these and continue where we were. G on Y. And these perhaps moving a little the other direction. Now in this area, we want to edge slide this up here, or vertex slide, I suppose. And we're going to have kind of a rounded quarter dome showing up there. But that's not what's showing up right now. What we have to do is bring these out here. And unless you have this option turned on, those did not merge together. So the way to solve that is select all the vertices, M, and by distance. There we go. We want some more geometry here and up here. So let's go to knife with K, hold shift to cut only the centers, and just bring that down here. Right click will allow you to start a new cut without exiting the tool. So enter. And now these are going to be tough to move on this plane just by using X and Y coordinates. So let's extend our cut up here, and we can use vertex slide to move those along it. Double tap G. Maybe bring this down. That will be pretty good. Now we're going to have these, when we subdivide, we'll have flat sections here because of this extra geometry. So what we want to do is kind of bring those out. And then we're going to use our loop tools again to just get these all spaced correctly. Might not work for that one, but we can do it here. Relax. Sorry, loop tools, not smart loop toolkit. That is actually a paid add-on. This is the one that comes with Blender loop tools. And we're going to relax and space. There we go. So we'll do the same to each of these. We may not want to do it up here. Let's see how this turns out. No, I didn't want to do that. So up there, we'll keep it that way. And this can edge slide up here. And now we're getting the shape we want of this, this top portion. And we'll need to mark this as a bevel weight of 1. And this edge, I said we couldn't use the loop tools on there. Let's turn on snapping. That is Shift Tab or this button here. And you want it to be snapping to vertices or vertex snapping. So let's hit G, Shift Z so that it does not move on the Z, and snap to the one above it. This is kind of manual sort of editing, but it gets the job done fairly simply. without using advanced tools or anything like that. All right, that's looking pretty good. This might bulge a little, but we're not going to know until we turn on our modifiers. Actually, that looks pretty good, except for these guys. There we go. I just slid that edge up a little. Still, you know, it's not a perfect surface, but it looks pretty good in my opinion. Now this is not pointed the way it should be. So let's take these and extrude them on the Y to the center. Now we don't have clipping turned on. That is this check mark here. There we go. And we'll take this, fill that in. And we do not need it to bevel there. So we'll take that weight down to 0 and take this one to 1. Then we have a point. And our shade smooth is not on. There we go. That is looking pretty good. There's stuff to play with here. I mean, it's up to your taste of what you're willing to allow and what not. But we're going to put materials on here that should hide a lot of the imperfections anyway. Actually, you know what? We can't quite move on to the guard yet. This is bothering me. So let's turn on our weld, move that up here, and move this edge along here. And that's going to be better, I think. That actually works out a lot better. And down here, we left some n-gons, which we want to get rid of. So let's make a cut across here. And cut here and here. And dissolve these. Then we have all quads. That looks a lot better. Now, let's move on to the guard. Leaving local view, we'll go back to a front-on view and we'll start on our guard. One thing that is kind of obnoxious this whole time, I've never recentered this entire thing on the correct axis. I mean, it's not incorrect, it's just kind of bothering me. I would like to have the center of my scene at the center of the guard. And we'll bring that down to there. That is basically, I was just selecting everything and bringing it down. All right, so now when we create our new object, plane or cube, whatever it is, we're just doing the same thing we did up top, which was select all of the vertices and merging them at the center. So I'm going to start at the end of the guard and start here. Doing the same technique as before, which was just right-clicking and control right-clicking to create new vertices from the selected one. And so this will have to come down here. There's a ridge down the center of the guard. As you can see in the picture down here, the ridge that slopes off top and bottom. Just getting everything spaced evenly. I noticed something got screwed up here when I used my automatic stuff. Manual editing will often get you the best results. In this case, that add-on didn't really save us anything. All right, so if we use the 3D cursor as the reference point for our actions, we're going to scale both of these on the Z to 0. Fill that in. And like before, we need to inset this. So we're going to inset. And I'm not really saying everything I'm doing here because it's really the same stuff we did before. If I use any new actions that haven't been covered, I'll be sure to point that out. And of course, everything is in the bottom left here, showing everything that I'm clicking. Right. It looks like perhaps our center, well, where I thought the center was and where it actually should be, is a little off. Bring it there. Yeah. Control I selects everything that's not selected and deselects what is. It inverts your selection. There we go. That looks good. Yes. So let's bring our cursor up to selected and bring its X location over to 0. There we go. And that will be the new origin of our object. So it won't be quite on 0, but that's fine. That's looking okay. All right, this vertex may stay there just to keep this a quad. All right, so let's start extruding this. You'll notice the cursor moved. That was because I shift right clicked rather than control right click, which is what I was intending. Shift S brings up the cursor menu, and we can take the cursor to the selected where the origin is. Going to bridge, fill, and we'll continue extruding. Control space brings a window to full screen. Okay. That's looking okay. We've got our central ridge coming across here. And there's going to be a point in the middle. So we'll bring that to the 0 location on X. And that looks pretty good. Now, before we go any further, we're going to select everything still in edit mode and bring it out on the Y a bit. And take this top edge, extrude it on the Y a little, and let's turn on or add a mirror on the X and the Y. Actually, just the Y for now, with clipping. And bring that all to the center. Now this is kind of a wide plane curve on the end. I think where we have it might look okay. We can always fix it later if not. But from here, we want to turn on auto merge to here. In fact, from there to there. We're going to move these over there to 0. Give ourselves a bit of a curve there. Okay, and turn on Z. All right, that seems okay. That guard looks a little thin. Take all of it and move it on Y a little bit. Okay, that seems all right. Let's take this central area, get that straightened out or set up the way we want it. Okay. And we'll take these in on the Y a little bit, extrude on the Y the rest of the way. In fact, this vertex is going away. Turn off the Y and we're going to apply. There we go. Thanks for hanging in with me this long. I know it's getting to be a long video. It is amazing how long something takes when you're trying to talk through it and you make mistakes and have to kind of go back through and re-edit and figure out where you picked up again. But if you do find these long videos helpful, I'd appreciate it if you could let me know in the comments. Hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications, all that good stuff. It all helps me show up in the YouTube algorithm and lets me know if what I'm doing is even helpful to people. So again, thank you, and I'll pick up with more audio in just a bit. if you didn't catch what I just did there, I selected the guard and then the pommel, and I copied the bevel modifier over just so that I have the same parameters as the one up top, as the pommel. A housekeeping item or two before we move on to the blade is to rename this as guard. Move that to working. Our reference collection should have been set in the beginning to not selectable. So let's do that now. So on the reference collection, uncheck that. Now we can't select anything that is inside this collection. Make sure you select another collection. In this case, it's going to be working, and we'll add a plane. It's going to face the view rather than the world, and make it an even 50 millimeters. In edit mode, let's select everything. It is by default. Move it on the Z -25. That way the origin is at the top of the mesh. I'm going to hide these and move this down a little bit more so that it's just hidden by the hilt, and take the bottom edge all the way down. That's with the grab tool, not with extrude. And put a edge down the center. Okay. Take this bottom edge and scale it down until the edges of the blade match the edges of the mesh. Good. And Control R gives us an edge loop. We'll slide that down here and use edge slide to bring that right there where we start seeing space around the image. And Control R to add a few more loops. So let's scale each one in the same manner. Up to the top where we can see our bit of a design that goes into the blade. Here in our image on the bottom right, we can see that we have a curved top to the fuller, and the edges of the blade swoop out a bit. So select all of the faces and inset to the point where right about there, I think. Delete this vertex, and with snapping turned on, move these on the Z to match here. There we go. Before we start deleting things, let's make sure some of these things are merged a little better. While our reference image isn't super clear here, and we're covering it up with our mesh, of course, I've opened the same image on another monitor, and much of this gets merged because this ridge goes up a good distance. Probably this one too. And this can be moved out here. In fact, get rid of half of this mesh so that we're not constantly trying to adjust each side to match. Let's add something here, an edge that lets us give a little bit of curve here. We don't want these edges to be, or these vertices to be too close together, because they're going to mess up our curve a bit if they're closer, if things aren't evenly spaced. So actually, let's evenly space them now. There we go. That looks pretty good. All the way up here, it's time to cut a bit of an arch for the fuller to end in. Subdivide this 3 times. Seems about right. Control B and V will bevel a vertex. This may be more geometry than we need, but I think it should look all right. And we're going to put our curve here. In fact, I want one more vertex than that. Subdivide. Now let's press Alt-H to unhide everything. This needs to stay at 0. However, we're going to take all of it in edit mode and move it along the Y in the negative direction. Let's add our mirror modifier, and that's going to be on the X and the Y. Make sure that if you have not already, hit apply, rotation, and scale. Otherwise, that mirror is not going to work correctly. And select the edge that goes around the entire outside of the blade, which would become the edge of the blade, actually. And we're going to extrude that on the Y in the positive direction. And if they go past each other, remember, you just need to enable clipping on your mirror modifier. So if we move that all the way to the center, that looks good. Back here, we're going to bring up the knife command again with K. Click, and A will constrain it to angles. You can type different angles. However, in this case, we're just going to go straight across and enable C so that it's cutting through, not just cutting what we can see. And that is what we need right across there. And we're going to add some triangles here. I know that's not something we do in modeling, but there are cases where it's actually the better choice. We're going to take this entire section of the blade all the way down to the center, and with auto merge turned on, they will merge themselves, but I'm not going to do that just yet. We're going to move it like so and have overlapping geometry for the time being. Now you can see here that we have this kind of swoop, and that looks pretty good to me. Our fuller has to be pressed in a little as well. However, we haven't completed what we need to do there. So let's select that face and this face, and we're going to inset them a little bit and press B once you enable it with I, and it will ignore that side, the center edge. So that looks pretty good. And this piece is going to be pressed in a little bit. So G, Y, move it on the positive a little, not to the center. And how do we want to do this? We're going to go into front view, cut across here, and bring up the knife tool again with K, cut across, we're going to get rid of some of our excess geometry here. So this and this, rather these, Control X will dissolve them. move these on the Z. Move this on the Z. I think we can do a little better with less. There we go. So let's cut this here and here, and they look all right. So let's bring these in a little as well. And turn off our reference. And that looks pretty good. Now it's time to start marking our bevels. Before we do that, let's merge that overlapping geometry that we have. So select everything in vertex mode, merge by distance, and start selecting your sharp edges. Now, so that we don't have to set up our bevel again, and it matches the others exactly, shift select another object that has a bevel and copy its bevel over to selected. All right, now Control 2 will add our subdivision surface modifier, and you'll see we have all kinds of weird, nasty stretching. We don't have enough geometry in this blade. We have this long stretch with nothing in it. So back in edit mode on the blade, let's add some more geometry. That looks a whole lot better. And triangles kind of mess up subdivision, but I think we're okay here. Maybe, maybe not. What we can do is take out a few of these. When we dissolve, sometimes you dissolve vertices. We don't want to do that in this case. I don't know that that makes a huge difference right now. So let's shade smooth. It's looking kind of okay, but up here you have these nasty kind of errors. If we go into edit mode again, you can see that we have all these weird, nasty n-gons. So let's take just a bit of time and clean those up. That should look all right. All right, so let's inspect the other end of our sword, our other end of our blade, and it's looks okay. Let's take these and kind of move them up on the Z a bit. Get a nicer looking curve there. And that looks all right to me. So that concludes the modeling phase of Anduril. And with the exception of a few places, which I'm not super happy with the geometry, we are finished. In fact, let's clean up one of those right now. We can come here, delete this guy, bring this one here, and delete these. There, I like that a lot better. There's always room for improvement. You always need to take time and start cleaning up little adjustments, such as this. Select everything and bring it in on the Y a bit so that it just fits in. There we go. And the guard could use a little bit of adjustment as well. But you can spend some time cleaning up your mesh, and I would love to see what you come up with. I mentioned earlier that we would be making materials for this. I will do that. However, this video is way too long as it is. And we will do that in the next video that I do on my channel. So with that, this is a good sword. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on those notifications. Until next time, I'm Carl with Blender Forge. Happy blending.